My family has always joked, lightly, sometimes offensively, but most often with that special shade of condescension that people use to talk about those they consider not quite fitting into their expectations. And I couldn't believe that all this would come crashing down on me so suddenly, that a seemingly ordinary joke would be followed by a real storm. They named such a small amount that it didn't fit in my head. How could they be so wrong? It happened just the other day. My phone rang non-stop, as if the world couldn't do without my answering for another second. The calls from the parents came one after the other, with increasing tension, with some kind of inescapable inspiration. When I finally picked up the phone, the first wave was like a blow. They started shouting over each other, not even letting me breathe, let alone say something in response. And before we continue, write in the comments from which city you are watching this video. Enjoy watching. At first, I couldn't understand what was going on at all. My father's voice was shrill, my mother's words rang with indignation, and it all merged into a cacophony of insults and accusations, leaving me completely confused. It wasn't until later, when their first fit of rage was over, that I realized they were blaming me. That I am allegedly sending money to my sister, Mira, without them knowing, and that this is allegedly a deception, betrayal, as if I conspired with her behind their back. They claimed, with icy confidence in their voices, that I sent them only $880 a month, while, according to them, my younger sister Mira generously sent them $112,000 a month. I didn't immediately understand where this figure came from, who inspired them with such nonsense. But I knew the truth. I was sending $112,000 every month myself. Just like the world. Everything was fair, equal, we agreed. But they weren't listening. You must be lying. My father's voice sounded so stern, as if he was passing sentence on me. Mira, with her modeling career, earns more than you do. She sends us $112,000 a month. And you? There was disappointment in his voice, so deep, almost physical, that I felt it digging into my skin. We are so disappointed in you, he continued, and every word hit like a stone. Mom picked up on it. Her voice, softer in timbre, was no less strict in content. Mira is so thoughtful, she whispered almost admiringly. And then, louder, do you think it's okay to just live on your own, squander your money without thinking about us? Why can't you be more like your sister? She cares so much about us. She sighed heavily, and this sigh was perhaps the bitterest reproach. I always felt that they favored the world. From the earliest years. She was stunning, radiant, all-encompassing. She caught the eye without making the slightest effort. Wherever she went, people turned and smiled, as if the light was spreading behind her. And I stayed in the shadows. I was often ignored, as if I were a minor character in a story called Mira. People have always compared us. They talked with undisguised admiration about her beauty, her walk, her look, and her successes. And then, as if jokingly, they added how plain I looked against her background, and they laughed. And I smiled back, pretending I didn't care. But I didn't care. From a young age, it was clear to everyone that Mira was born to succeed. Acting, modeling, these were her scenes. Her parents doted on her, the trendiest clothes, new gadgets, any courses she wanted. And I used to wear an old down jacket, often already last season, and I didn't go to the courses at all. Not because I didn't want to, but because I knew, there's no budget for this. The budget was only enough for Mira. She grew up spoiled and naive, believing that everything that belongs to me belongs to her. She took my things without asking, sometimes without even hiding, and when I protested, my parents just shook their heads. Let it go, Amanda. She's younger. Be a good big sister. They ignored my feelings so easily, took her side so quickly, as if there was no other way to look at the situation. Over the years, this favoritism has become more pronounced. In elementary school, when Mira decided she needed her own room, my parents didn't hesitate for a second. They just moved me, evicted me, more precisely, into the living room. You don't have many things, you have enough space to sleep, they said, period. The living room with faded family portraits and a clock that ticked loudly at night became my new bedroom. I slept there, among the echoes of the past, feeling forgotten, deprived not only of comfort, but also of the right to personal space. At some point, I decided, that's enough. I stopped sending money home. Not out of vindictiveness, but to prove my case, to remind me of myself not as an ATM, but as a person. My name is Amanda. I am 31 years old. I work for a food processing company, and every day I live with the burden of realizing that I am a less beloved child. While my amazing sister Mira, who is 6 years younger than me, enjoys the attention and love that I have never felt from my parents. But despite the coldness, despite the harsh comparisons, I continue to keep a warm, bright memory of my grandparents, who were the only truly kind adults in my childhood. It was my grandfather who gave me the name Amanda in the spring, when the roses bloomed, Amanda blew. He adored these flowers, their durability, their tenderness, and said that these were the qualities he saw in me. I remember sitting on his lap, wrapped in his warmth, listening to his comforting voice. Amanda, no matter how hard it is, you can always overcome difficulties. Happiness will blossom again, like Amanda blew, in spring. These words have stayed with me like a silent talisman, and I often return to them in my thoughts, especially when it becomes unbearably painful. As I got older, many things that had previously felt like subtle injustices began to manifest themselves with frightening clarity. The differences in how my parents treated me and Mira could no longer be attributed to character or mood traits. It was systemic. Everyday. Smarmy. I realized more and more clearly, I'm a stranger in my own house. Not unwanted, no, rather, just not the one who was expected, on whom they were betting. When I plucked up the courage to talk about my dream of becoming a school nurse, taking care of children, being there for them in their illnesses and fears, and talking about university entrance exams, I expected at least an attempt to understand, hear, and share my excitement. Instead, my parents brushed it off almost immediately, as if I had suggested something ridiculous. We can't afford to pay for university tuition for you, Amanda. Think about your sister Mira, Mom said, as if that was the only possible argument. We need to save up for her future, my father added, without even glancing in my direction. Their persistence was like a concrete wall that neither logic nor feelings could break. Financially, we have never been poor. An ordinary family where there was enough for trips, good gifts for the holidays, and sometimes dinner outside the house. They just made a choice. And this choice was not in my favor. My dreams quietly receded into the background, fading day by day, while the whole family enthusiastically paved the way for Myra's goals. After graduating from high school, when Mira went to study at a prestigious university, the one where I wasn't even given a chance to think about studying, I went to work. I managed to get a position in a small but stable company located a few train stops from Myra's house. I tried not to dwell on the insults, but deep down I wanted someone to just say, "You're important too, Amanda." I moved in soon after. I rented a small but cozy studio apartment near the office. She became my island of peace and quiet. For the first time in my life, I could just breathe without feeling the comparisons gaze on me, without being reproached for who I am. Being independent wasn't just a new stage, it was liberating. Meanwhile, at home, the conversations didn't stop. Everything revolved around Mira. She was doing well at the university. She was noted by the teachers, then by the talent agency. It's just that while shopping with friends, someone noticed her, and everything started spinning. The parents beamed with pride, as if they had discovered a new diamond to the world. Mira became a model, a face on the covers, a voice in interviews, the pride of the family. One day she called me, her voice trembling with excitement and some kind of almost sincere gratitude. "Amanda, we owe everything to Mom and Dad," she said enthusiastically. "Let's start giving them $12,000 every month, just to show how much we appreciate them." The amount stunned me. $120,000 a month was serious money. Yes, Myra's modeling career may have brought such income, but my salary was about $66,000 per month. To survive after such a promise, I would have to radically rethink my entire financial reality, and also find additional income somewhere. With great reluctance and anxiety, I made the decision to get a part-time job as a security guard at a construction site on weekends. The work was hard and physically exhausting, especially on those hot summer days when the asphalt melted underfoot and metal structures burned the skin, or on winter nights when the cold penetrated the clothes, despite the layers of thermal underwear. Many times I stood under the black sky, peering into the darkness and thinking, why am I doing all this? But every time I answered myself, out of loyalty. Out of an effort to prove that I'm not worse. That I'm worthy. Deep down, I clung to grandfather's words, the ones he whispered to me as a child, when I was hiding on his lap, hurt and tired. Happiness will blossom again, Amanda, like Amanda Blue, in spring. And even if happiness hadn't come yet, I continued, despite the lack of sleep, fatigue, and the growing feeling that I existed only for the sake of other people's expectations. I kept going because these days, when everything seemed too difficult, something small happened that gave me strength, unexpected kindness. My colleagues, seeing how tired I was, how I was literally dragging myself to work, started bringing me coffee, buying me something to eat, just leaving a note on my desk with a smile. These gestures were reminiscent of, I'm still a person who deserves to be cared for. I cut back on everything that could be cut back. I stopped eating out, wore the same shoes for the second year, canceled subscriptions, postponed the trip that I had wanted for so long. I did everything to reach the required amount, $122,000. As soon as it turned out, I immediately sent it to my parents. With difficulty, but I fulfilled my promise. But inwardly, I knew that if this continued, would simply not be able to stand it. It was then that I made a new decision to upgrade my qualifications. Get a professional certificate that will open the door for me to a more paid job. I devoted every free minute to studying. The days merged into a continuous stream: morning, work, evening, construction, night, study modules, tests, articles. My life has become a faceless series of tasks. In this crazy schedule, I started missing calls from my parents, not out of malice, just because I didn't have the energy or a minute of free time. When did I finally have a minute to call them back? I was met with instant anger, searing like a sharp gust of wind on a winter day. You're terrible. What do you think of us? My father shouted with such fury, as if I had done something unacceptable, as if I were not his daughter, but a traitor who betrayed my family. My mother's voice, coming from the back of the room, echoed his agreement. She muttered something, restrained, but with obvious resentment, as if I had inflicted a personal wound. I was taken aback, confused, and didn't immediately find something to say, so I quietly asked what the problem was. Are you talking about the money I'm sending? I said, confused, looking for at least a shadow of logic in their indignation. I couldn't figure out the source of this outburst. My father replied with icy directness, Do you know how much the world is sending? $112,000. And you're only 80. Are you kidding us? I felt my fingers turn white with tension, gripping the phone as if I wanted to hold reality in place. I exclaimed, shocked by the accusation, which had no basis in fact. I'm sending $112,000 a month. My resolve broke through my confusion. My voice rang with resentment and bewilderment. But my father didn't even listen. Don't lie, he said irritably. Mira earns more than you do in her modeling career, so she's the one who sends us $112,000 every month. He didn't stop. His voice became increasingly cold and disappointed. I'm really disappointed in you. Mira is so smart. And then, as if on cue, my mother intervened. Her reproaches seemed to fall on me like heavy stones. She condemned my lifestyle, said that I didn't take care of my family as much as I should, as if all my efforts meant nothing, as if my sleepless nights, double work, studies, they were just the whims of a selfish woman. I was stunned. Sadness washed over me like a cold wave that took my breath away. I couldn't formulate an answer. The words stuck somewhere in my throat, somewhere between indignation and pain. And then suddenly, like a flash of lightning among the gray clouds, it dawned on me. It was a huge, annoying misunderstanding. Earlier, Mira suggested that we send money to parents anonymously, under pseudonyms, so that no one knows who is contributing how much. At that moment, it seemed reasonable to me, devoid of vanity, an honest family decision. But I didn't know that her stage name, the very pseudonym under which she appeared in contracts and bank documents, was Rain. and we chose the common name Rainbow for us. As a result, a small mistake, 80-cent transactions made in trial mode were mistakenly registered in my name Amanda, and her transfers of $122,000, to my horror, turned out to be assigned to the very pseudonym Rain, which no one associated with me. Before I could explain anything, my parents unanimously declared that they didn't need my mocking, pathetic 80 cents. And they just hung up. I sat in a daze, unable to believe that everything I had done, everything I had gone through for them, had suddenly turned into contempt. A mixture of anger and betrayal overwhelmed me. I couldn't understand. How could Mira, my sister, not explain our agreement to her parents? Why didn't she correct them, tell them that everything was different? Why did I let this misunderstanding grow to such an extent that I, devastated and sleepless, became an enemy in the eyes of those for whom it all began? I didn't know what to do next. Should I continue sending money? Did it even make more sense? Overcome with doubts, I decided to seek advice from someone I truly trusted, my high school friend Scarlett. She worked for a prestigious consulting firm and was known for her insight, practicality, and impeccable logic. She always gave honest, balanced advice. When I wrote to her asking for an urgent meeting, she was surprised, but did not refuse. We met for lunch in a small, cozy cafe where time seemed to flow more slowly. She immediately noticed my worried face, furrowed her brows, and asked, "What's wrong, Amanda?" I started telling him the whole family story, from the moment Mira proposed to me to the phone call that left me devastated. Scarlett listened to me in silence, with attention, without interrupting. Then, after a moment's hesitation, she said thoughtfully, "Amanda, are your parents having financial difficulties? Are they still fixated on those 80 cents?" I nodded. Her eyebrows arched in surprise. $112,000 is a lot of money. And if they're still complaining about 80 cents, then maybe it's not just the numbers. Do they have debts? I replied that I didn't know. We continued to discuss, and Scarlett helped me look at the situation differently. "You're saying that this money is being spent on both of you," she said, "but you didn't even go to university, right? They mostly went to the world. And your father is still working. Then where did the need for such a sum suddenly come from?" Her words, so direct and honest, suddenly gave meaning to my inner anxiety. I began to realize that all this time I had been letting myself be pushed around, letting guilt rule my life. Scarlett continued, gently but insistently, "If they really think you're only sending 80 cents, maybe you should just take it as a hint and stop paying. You're too kind, Amanda. Don't let your kindness become your weakness." Her words struck a chord with me. They awakened a part of me that had been silent for too long, allowing others to determine what was right and what was wrong. And at that very moment, I decided that I would no longer allow the pressure of my family to consume my personal truth. 3 months after I, with an effort, pulled myself away from the painful feeling of guilt and, under the weight of cooled, but still throbbing disappointment in my chest, stopped sending monthly transfers, my phone, which had been so silent, as if it had observed the calm before the storm, suddenly began to ring inexorably from the very early morning. I was in no hurry to pick up the phone, sensing that the voice coming from the other end of the line would bring me neither peace nor warmth. Finally, yielding to the insistence of the call, I picked up the phone. It was Mira, and her irritation, almost rage, could be felt in every syllable. "Why haven't you been answering your phone all morning, Amanda? And why did you stop sending money yourself? What were you thinking?" Her voice, usually soft and charming, now sounded sharp notes of reproach, and I, taken by surprise, could only barely find the strength to restrain myself. The conversation was excruciating. I felt the weight of her accusations, as if they were not words, but weights pressing into the ground. I would like to shout out that I have difficulties myself, that I struggle every day, that I am not an Iron Man, not an infinitely generous source, but I restrained myself because there was still pain inside me from the injustice I had experienced, and I did not want to give her a reason to accuse me of cruelty. During these months, while I was silent and distant, Scarlett, my old, loyal friend, who was also familiar with a close friend of my youth, secretly began to collect information. And what she told me wasn't just unexpected, it was revealing. I found out that Myra's so-called financial contributions, The ones she allegedly sent to her parents as a sign of gratitude actually served more as a mask to maintain her own self-esteem and the overly lavish, almost theatrical lifestyle of our parents. Scarlett found out that Mira, hiding behind a facade of well-being, spent money on expensive clothes and cosmetics, and at the same time, she did not hesitate to complain to her friends, "My older sister is my source of funds." Lately, I've been relying on her money more and more. These words, conveyed to me almost verbatim, left behind a heavy aftertaste, as if I'd heard myself being called a bank account instead of a sister. She confessed to them that she might have to cut back on face care and cosmetics, and all this while I was literally counting the cents, trying to live until the next paycheck. It also became known that our mother, with her inherent craving for beauty and status, increasingly indulged in luxury brand purchases, and my father, contrary to his words about employment and workload, had not worked at all for a long time. His activity was gambling, which he continued, hoping, probably one day hit the jackpot. To support their wasteful, completely untrue lifestyle, at the expense of my hard-earned money seemed to me not only insulting, but also absurd. Didn't I hear him say he was working? So you don't need my money, right? One day, unable to stand it, I decided to have a direct conversation. I ran into them after the transfers stopped. They finally talked to Mira, and under the pressure of reality, from which it was impossible to turn away, she, through tears and with anguish, admitted that her income was far from what she claimed. She said that she had long been a burden to her modeling agency, that despite her pretty appearance, she had no vocal or dancing talent, and therefore she could not advance in the entertainment industry. Her appearances were rare, insignificant, and most often for obscure online catalogs that paid a pittance. All this destroyed the facade of success with which she covered reality, and caused a drastic change in the attitude of our parents. But instead of remorse or at least apologies, I heard only a cold, confident, almost commanding speech. "We were strict with you. But don't worry and just keep sending money as before," they said, undeterred by any shadow of guilt. Moreover, their tone became demanding. "You have to pay 3 months of debt. We've been preparing all this time, so please transfer the money as soon as you can. You're reliable." Their arrogance, their complete lack of gratitude, and even admitting their lies shocked me to the core. I couldn't believe that everything they found out, everything that came out, didn't at least make them think. And then I gathered my courage and asked the question that had been bothering me all this time. "I heard from Mira that you have debts." I asked, finally trying to clarify the true financial situation of the family. The answer was contemptuous and distant. "Debts? No. We just don't have the ability to cover the tuition fees from your grandparents' inheritance." This phrase became a real revelation for me, like a mirror, which suddenly clearly reflected all the lies that I have been fed for years. In an instant, the deep contradictions between what I was forced to believe and what actually happened became apparent. And when I already thought that I couldn't hear anything more amazing, my father, with the same self-confidence, declared that Myra's statements about debts were fiction. "We just need a little more for shopping," he said calmly, and Mom casually added, as if it were some small thing, "Your dad's salary is quite enough." It was obvious that they were doing a great job with finances, without needing any input from me, and with every word, with every look, it became clearer that this whole long-term story with their imaginary needs was nothing more than a convenient legend for them. I wondered, if my cousin Amir, without my education or my contacts, finds a stable job and earns an honest living, then why should I be an eternal purse for adults who have chosen the path of comfort and dependence? This realization plunged me more and more into disappointment, which became piercing, almost physical, when my father, suddenly raising his voice, abruptly interrupted my thoughts. "How dare you talk to your parents like that? I didn't raise my daughter to behave like that." His words lashed out like a lash, evoking in me that old, familiar mixture of shame and pain. My mother didn't lag behind, supporting his opinion with that cold indifference that always seemed to me scarier than any cries. "We don't need a daughter like you if you're going to behave like this." At the same moment, as if in a theatrical scene, they announced that they were ready to use the savings left by my grandfather, savings that, as I had been told all my life, were intended exclusively for my future. "We're just using your grandfather's savings for you. You're no longer part of this family," they said with a frightening calmness that was more like a verdict than a family conflict. Those words hurt, leaving a cold void in their wake, and when they left without turning around, without leaving even a hint of regret, I broke down. I felt like I had become an unnecessary, discarded detail of my own past, and for the first time I seriously questioned my value to my family, the love they talked about so much, but which I never really felt. 3 months of silence have passed, long months filled with heavy reflection and inner work. And so, one unremarkable day, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, so when I opened it, I was left confused. My parents and Mira were standing in front of me. Their exhausted, tired appearance was strikingly different from the previous one, arrogant and confident, and looking at them, I did not immediately come up with an answer. I hesitated, but I let them in anyway, surprised at how much everything in my life had changed since our last meeting. I studied hard to get a small business consultant certificate, which allowed me not only to find a new profession, but also to significantly increase my income. Scarlett, who always stood by me in difficult moments, helped me get a new job. I became a team leader, found confidence, a taste for life, and even began to think about moving closer to the office, to a spacious, bright apartment. But as soon as my guests crossed the threshold, instead of words of congratulations or at least polite interest in my success, they cast an almost accusing glance at my clothes, noticed how good I looked, and without further ado stated, "Before you indulge in such a luxury, give us some money." They demanded, they begged, as if they had the right to do so, and there was no shadow of remorse in their tone, only pretension, as if my achievements were not mine, but our family as a whole. Disgust at their arrogant attitude overwhelmed me. Restraining my emotions, I answered them directly. My father's income and my worlds make it possible to live comfortably. What's really going on? And directed her gaze at Mira. Tears filled her eyes, and finally, the words began to come out of her, that her difficulties in the modeling business were continuing, that they were much more serious than she had ever shown. She admitted that she had recently been noticed by another agency and, seizing this opportunity, invested a significant amount of money, hoping that this would be the beginning of her acting career. But this hope turned into a disaster. The agency turned out to be fraudulent and disappeared, taking all the invested funds. I listened, not feeling the same pity anymore, just tired. And then the doorbell rang again. A man in a formal suit stood on the threshold with a folder in his hands. He introduced himself as an employee of a consumer credit company and asked if I was related to people living at the address associated with Mira and my parents. I nodded, stunned, and then he informed me that they had borrowed a large sum, counting on Myra's rapid success in show business, and now, after a failure, they could not repay the debt. It also turned out that Mira spent large sums in nightclubs trying to relieve stress, and all this led to even greater financial losses. When the financial agent asked if I confirmed the relationship, I answered with a heavy heart, but firmly, "I don't know these people at all. I have nothing to do with them." It was a sharp, final break, not only emotionally, but also legally, with the destructive patterns of behavior of my family. After the turbulent events that left deep, painful traces in our lives, my parents found themselves in a situation of complete bankruptcy, to which their reckless decisions led step by step, year after year, despite all my warnings, despite attempts to give them a chance to change. Their debts were completely written off by court order, but the price they had to pay for it was high. Our old, memory-soaked family home, with its creaking floors, the smell of cinnamon from the kitchen on Sundays, the sounds of my children laughing in the garden, was sold, and they had to move into a modest apartment, the so-called apartment, in one of the cheap apartment complexes on the outskirts of the city, where even the walls seemed to sigh with longing. Nevertheless, the irony of fate manifested itself to the fullest when both of them managed to find work through a temporary employment agency. My mother got a job as an assistant in the laundry at the hospital, where she sorted laundry all day, and my father, as a result of random distribution, ended up at a construction site, where, as it turned out, I myself once I used to work part-time, back in the days when I still hoped that my help to my family would make a difference. On his first day, he was greeted by workers who found him clumsy and out of step with the general rhythm. "Oh, this old man, help me," one of them said. "There used to be a young lady here, but she quit. She worked hard sending money to her parents." I would like to see the faces of parents who would force their daughter to work here. And at that moment, as one of the eyewitnesses later told me, my father's expression turned hard, as if suddenly reality with all its cool truth hit him in the chest. Meanwhile, Mira, tired of failures and revelations, completely abandoned her modeling aspirations and tried to find her place in the nightlife of the city. She got a job in several clubs and bars, hoping for quick fame and recognition, but her egocentric features, too pronounced not to alienate, were not liked by customers and owners. She was fired from everywhere she tried to stay, and in the end she made ends meet by making money in an inconspicuous bar on the outskirts. Her former luster faded, her lifestyle left traces of fatigue and decay on her face, and stories about modeling days began to sound like something made up, almost comical, among the regulars. A model? Are you kidding? Look in the mirror. With these words she was greeted, and those who did not know the whole story laughed at her, as they once did at me. I severed ties with my family completely and focused on building my own, free life. Not the one that was imposed on me, but the one that I dreamed of in the silence of my late evenings. 6 years later, fully immersed in my work, my circle of close friends, and my self-confidence, I found myself at the wedding of Scarlett, my most loyal friend, mentor, and the woman without whom my life would have been much poorer. The celebration took place in a picturesque chapel in Tampa, and in front of us stretched the endless, gentle sea, reflecting the sky full of hope. The atmosphere around them was filled with a sense of new beginnings, deep, quiet happiness. Standing next to Scarlett was her husband, beaming with pride, the man she had met at her firm and fallen in love with, despite the fact that she had been focused solely on her career for a long time. During the ceremony, she leaned over to me and, with a radiant, truly feminine, free smile, whispered, "Amanda, you have to face your feelings too. I achieve everything I want on my own. And I quickly discard what I don't need." Her husband intervened, laughing, "Don't leave me, okay?" And the whole room burst into cheerful, sincere laughter. Scarlett's wedding was not just a celebration of love, it was a celebration of freedom. The freedom she helped me find, step by step, word by word, with her support and example. I hugged her tightly and said with a tremor in my voice, "Scarlett, be happy. I'm really grateful to you." It was a joyous event, rare in its purity, and when the celebration was coming to an end, she took me to her friend, a tall, well-built man with a warm, charming smile, who, as it turned out, ran his own architectural firm. "I wanted to introduce you to Ethan," she said. "Your personalities are almost the same," Scarlett joked, causing us to laugh a little. Ethan and I instantly found a common language. The conversation with him was light, sincere. He knew how to listen, and when we had lunch together, I felt something alive and real blossom in my chest, where it had been empty for a long time, like in those days when my grandfather told me always move forward, don't stop. I decided that I would accept both work and love. I would allow myself to feel again, to believe again, to build again. "Grandpa, please continue to look after me from above." "I'll make sure to fully blossom," I whispered, a smile spreading across my face, and at that moment, I was really looking forward to the future.